Nestled in the heart of historic downtown Wilkesboro, the 1915 offers a wedding experience like no other. Once a federal courthouse and post office, the 1915 combines rich history with timeless charm. From intimate gatherings to full-day rentals, we provide the perfect backdrop for your most cherished moments. With indoor and outdoor options, bridal and groom suites, every detail is crafted just for you. Make your wedding unforgettable at the 1915, Wilkesboro's historic wedding venue, where your story begins.
Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations.
Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of Life in Wilkes.
Good morning, Lane Dyer. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Awfully good to see you. We saw each other last, I think, at the North Carolina Society of Historians. And we were at that great place. You remember the place?
Hart Square.
Hart Square, that's right, an iconic place. And I thought that was a perfect location for the Society's gathering this year because of what the place actually is and the historic significance. Did you know, or did you discover while we were there, that that's one of the large, or maybe the largest collection of period log cabins in America?
I confess, until the society decided to use that location, I'd never heard of it. And it's not even that far from here.
Sure.
But once they'd made that decision, my good friend Ken Welburn at the Wilkes Record filled me in on it. He has a great book that he got from the guy that created Hart Square. And he was showing me that and talking about it. And so I was prepared, but still overwhelmed when we got there because it's an amazing place. They just have so much to see.
It's not a small place. I've had several people ask me about it and said, well, how long does it take? I said, well, it takes me a long time when I walk through because I'm very curious. I'm taking pictures of everything, So it was just a beautiful experience, I thought. And I think everybody enjoyed themselves there.
And their new conference center was amazing.
Yes.
What a beautiful facility.
Yes. It was great. Well, congratulations on your wins this year. That was a good thing, right?
Yeah, I was really surprised and humbled to be recognized. I haven't been writing that long, and to get that kind of recognition, it was really gratifying.
Well, it's nice to write one book, but you've got a stack of books now, so that lets everybody know that you love history and you have an interest and you can write. So that's a good thing. So let's talk about, Lane, your journey in life, because as a writer you've had a full careers, you've done all sorts of things, but we all are the way we are for a reason, and it starts from the beginning. So tell us about that.
Well, I grew up here in Wilkes, and I guess Cricket and Millers Creek area, and got my family, a lot of family here, been here for many generations, and I have a lot of roots over in Ashe County too. My grandmother was from Idlewild Road.
Oh, sure.
And so
up the hill.
Growing up, we spent a lot of time over there with her family, and I feel kind of connected to Ashe and Wilkes both, but Wilkes was home.
They're very similar, though, aren't they? I mean, as far as the culture of the people.
They are. The people, I think especially, are the same. Of course, Ashe was part of Wilkes County until, 1790?
That's
99,
right.
I think.
The great state of Wilkes. While it still is the biggest in landmass, it used to be even bigger.
It did. Yeah. I think probably double the size that it is now at one time.
Well, that's kind of how how it was in the beginning, right? As we began to settle in America and establish those boundaries. Well, the North and South Carolina was just the Carolinas. It was, it wasn't or the Carolina. It wasn't the division that it is now with state lines. But that's the way it works.
Yeah, but I grew up here. Went to Union Elementary in West Wilkes, and then I left to go into the Air Force in the early 80s, and I spent 4 years there. What a eye-opening experience. What a way to broaden your perspective, because I was able to travel to lots of different countries and lots of different parts of the United States. But I came back.
Well, let's stop there for a minute, because growing up in Wilkes, having the experience, did you grow up on a farm or?
Just in a rural neighborhood.
Okay, in a rural neighborhood. And you go to high school, and then was it straight out of high school you go into the military?
Pretty much. I tried college for a while, but I wasn't ready for it.
Right. So then you really got in college, right?
Frankly, I joined the Air Force because I wanted to get help straightening out my life. Developing some discipline, self-discipline, developing some focus, being able to meet some goals with, and they sure took care of that.
So let me ask you, was that your idea or your parents' idea?
Oh, it was my idea.
It was
for sure. Yeah.
So wait a minute. So one day you're just wandering around, realizing, wait a minute, it's got to be better. I mean, what was that moment? What happened that let you think or say, I need to join the Air Force? I mean, was it a recruiter? Was there a messaging there that really struck a chord with you?
Well, frankly, I had failed at so many things. I went to ASU, dropped out. Went to Wilkes Community College, dropped out. Went to work for Lowe's Companies and an office credit manager trainee position down in Asheboro.
That didn't
work out either. Okay. And I thought, well, I've got to make some changes.
Right.
And the Air Force appealed to me because, I'm a technology-oriented kind of person, and the mission that they have and being around the aircraft and that kind of thing. That's
what appeals to you. Yeah, okay. See, that's a better story. Right? I'm like, okay, there's a reason you did that. So, all right. So the day comes, right? And it's time to go. Right. So what was that moment like? Was family there? I mean, how did that happen?
It was something. Of course, this was in late 1981. My brother took me to Statesville, where I caught a bus to Charlotte, and where I was inducted and put on a plane and sent to, the Air Force basic training. Everyone goes to Lackland Air Force Base down in San Antonio. So in the space of a day, I went from Wilkes with my little duffel bag to Statesville, to a bus, to Charlotte, on an airplane, and then into basic training.
Wow. So was that an eye-opener?
Oh, it was. Right. It was. I quickly found out there were reasons why I was failing. One was because I was lazy. And, one was because, I didn't want to take instruction from anyone else. I wanted to do things my own way. And basic training in any branch of the military is designed to overcome those barriers, and so it was a great experience. I was actually the honor graduate from my basic training flight.
Wait a minute. So you went from things not working out to finding some structure and purpose in your life, and then you went from the lower part of the class to the top of the class.
Yeah, I did.
How'd that feel?
Yeah, it felt great.
Yeah.
It felt great. Yeah. The entire 4 years was good character building experience, and it was a chance to work with people from other parts of the country.
How was that? Because a lot of times I think prejudice tends to be because of fear. Back to that same thing, right? Yeah. Because we don't know, or we see preconceived notions that other people have shared, and it's like, well, could they be like that? But then when you're actually in that structured environment, it was different. So what was that discovery like for you when you're around all sorts of folk, right?
Yeah.
pretty much going through this same battle that you were going through in life. How was that?
Mark Twain said, prejudice is fatal when you travel. And,
right.
And he's right. I went to school here for 12 years. The only black person I even knew was the janitor at Union Elementary, was Mr. Harris. Great guy. I'm sure lots of people remember him. But suddenly, I had lots of friends that were African American and had their own point of view. One guy was from inner city Los Angeles, and getting to know those folks and hearing about their issues and hearing about mine, it was a great experience.
So you developed friendships and learned from each other?
We did. We did, yeah.
Could if you think about that moment, was that one of your biggest takeaways that maybe help prepare you for the future as well, including self-discipline and learning how to do the things in a certain way, but just understanding that all people seem to go through a bit of the same thing?
It was. It definitely was, Carl, because, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their problems and have empathy for things that they're dealing with, I think that's a real part of the maturity process.
Sure.
Which that's what I really needed.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, that sounds like a wonderful, wonderful part of life. So what happens when there's a decision, you've done 4 years. I'm sure you had options to pick up another package and do more, but something directed you differently, right?
It did. I took a test before I got out with it's called the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, which tests your ability to learn foreign languages. And I scored really high on that, and they wanted me to go to Monterey, California, and learn to be a translator and speak, Russian or whatever language it was that they would train you in. But I wanted to get out. I wanted to go back to school. I'd failed at college a couple of times. I wanted to give it another shot. I'd gotten married, and my wife and I, we thought coming back here and settling down would be the way to go. And so came back. I went to Wilkes Community College for a couple of years. My career goals kept evolving. I started out in a one-year program, and then I was in a 2-year degree program, and then I decided I would go on to Appalachian and get a 4-year degree. And
was that different? I know you said you tried it earlier and it didn't work, but once you had your military experience, you come back and you're back at Wilkes Community College, which is a great school, right?
It sure is. Yeah.
And having that experience then, when you stepped in after having 4 years of discipline and training and appreciation for learning, how was that experience? When you're sitting in the class now, was there a moment where you took a breath and you said, now I know how to do this? Did you have that moment?
I did. It was... I think maybe the first couple of days I was like, wow, I don't know if I can go back to learning math again or not. but after that, it was easy. I got a job at the old Holiday Inn over on 268, and as the second shift desk clerk. And so I went to school during the day, and there in the evening, in between checking out guests, I did my homework. And it was right across the way from the college. That all worked out great. Of course, I wasn't home very much, but you have to make sacrifices to get ahead. But it was so much easier after that experience in the military.
All right. So Wilkes Community College. Then where do you go next?
Went to ASU and majored in biology with a minor in education. And I was going to be a school teacher. And I did student teaching at Alexander Central, and I don't know. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, and I got an offer to work for a state agency, the Employment Security Commission up in Boone, and I decided to take that and give that a try, and that turned into a 25-year career.
Yeah.
And so it took me all over the state.
Right. Well, let's talk about that, because that's a sector of our government and services that a lot of people have heard the name before, but talk about what your responsibilities were there and why was that an important place to be?
Well, that was at the time, the agency that provided unemployment insurance benefits, that developed labor market information for the state, and also spent great efforts helping people find jobs, working with employers to get their jobs advertised and listed in our database, and then working with the public whenever they needed a job or wanted to move up. I started out, on the front lines as what we called an interviewer, and I moved up through several layers. I was an unemployment insurance claim supervisor, a local manager, a regional manager, and eventually the deputy director for the agency, and then the director when I retired.
For the state.
For the state, yeah.
So that had to be an amazing experience of just exploring and understanding in a very intimate way human nature, the human experience, things that everybody goes through in their best and times of trying to figure it out as well, right?
For sure. Sitting with people, sometimes they're desperate, sometimes they're in shock, sometimes they're hurting, sometimes they're angry. It really helps you to understand people, to understand the challenges that we all have, in the country. What really helped me prepare for being in that position was working as a desk clerk at the hotel, though, because I learned so much about customer service and what people responded to positively and what they responded to negatively, and then that experience working as an interviewer, helping people find out about jobs and apply for benefits, that built on that.
Right.
And so I have a really strong customer service ethic. And then later on, when I was in charge of things,
right,
that was what I expected of people.
So you were building one step on top of the other. So working at the front desk helped you with basically a cross sector of all people, right?
Yes.
Because everybody needs a room sometimes.
Right. That's right. Sometimes when they're not even sober.
That's right. So you saw folks in their best and most relaxed situations and having all those issues, but at least it was an opportunity to do something you hadn't done before.
That's right.
Yeah. Because people. To me, that would be a job of where you're just dealing with a cross sector of society. So you grew up in a rural community, tried something, it worked, went to the military, learned another cultural way of being, right? And then you start learning the value of education. So blending all those things together, and then to find a career that you were really able to serve. Did you think of it that way? Was it a job for you, or did you realize that, wow, I'm serving my community, I'm serving my state?
Yeah, it felt very much like a service career. And, people say public service, and it was. Working with the Employment Security Commission, and nowadays it's known as NC Works, so they're still around, just in a little different form. But doing that work, you always went home feeling good.
Because often you were able to help someone.
That's right. And people would come back, say, thank you, I got the job, or I got my benefits, thank you so much. So, yeah.
So you were able to make a difference. So what was that like working on the state level, being at the top, and then you realize, okay, I'm here now. So were you mindful of the fact that there was more weight on your shoulder, and you probably shouldn't screw up?
Well, I moved up fairly quickly. I spent about 3 years as a manager of the office in Salisbury, and then I spent about another 3 years as the regional manager for the Charlotte area, which was like 12 counties. And then suddenly I found myself at the state level, and what was basically, I guess you'd call it like a deputy assistant secretary kind of position, and as basically the chief operating officer for the agency, with 90-some career centers around the state, with probably 1,100 employees, and all of them looking to me for guidance often. Of course, I had people that I reported to as well, but I was running the day-to-day system, and what a change, what a growth experience. I felt like that was a job I grew into after I was in it for about 10 years.
Okay.
And it really helped me to understand how things work. And for the first time, I was dealing with elected officials, county commissioners, our state legislator. A few times I had to go over and testify about different things with the General Assembly, which I didn't enjoy.
Right.
But very, very broadening experience.
So seeing that vastness of touch points, along the way, and when you get in the top layer, and you still have people to work with, but they're different people, right? You are in that leadership realm, if you will, and you are in the political realm. So why don't you describe just a couple of those feelings that you had or realities that you had to deal with, and how it was different once you stepped into the political arena and being accountable and having to report and share reports and visions with different people. How was that different than just working with the regular people? Regular is not the right word, I'm sure, but the layers before you got to that layer.
Right. Well, yeah, and I know exactly what you mean. So in my prior positions, I worked with other career bureaucrats. Either they worked for me or I worked for them, and there was stability. Those people were there. They were working 30-year careers for the most part. And most of us, had been around for 20 years or more. And when I moved to that next level, suddenly I was the person that dealt with the political leadership that comes and goes. And so seeing that over 10 years, people come and go. We had, 4 or 5 leaders. Some were really good. Some were terrible. Some understood what we were about. Some didn't. Some trusted us. Some didn't. And so I would spend a lot of time up at on what we call the 5th floor with that leadership, trying to explain why we did things the way we did, trying to explain why someone did something that they did, because, often people misbehave or they do something that's misunderstood. And so, learning to deal with the political class, that was interesting.
Don't you think that, or do you think that was a valuable part of your journey as well? So it's different, but still yet valuable, so that you know how things work. Was that part of it?
Yes, it does, because now, I know why things get done the way they do a lot of times in government, the state and the federal level, because I became a federal employee later after I retired from the Employment Security Commission. And so I can watch the news maybe and take a breath, because I know what maybe is going on behind the scenes.
Right. And then you know how things actually do work.
That's right.
There's that public thing. It's like, well, wait a minute, a lot of steps that
what it takes to get it done.
To actually make those things happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think that might be an area that would be beneficial for everyone to have a better comprehension of, just knowing how things work?
I've always been a proponent of that. When I was in charge, one of the things that I encouraged our employees to do would be to switch jobs for a while. And so I would ask supervisors in one of our offices to go spend a week in a different office, to switch places with a supervisor there, and ask managers to come up and see things at the state level, and ask the state level managers to go out and spend time in the field.
And that didn't scare them off running.
I've always welcomed those kind of opportunities, but a lot of people don't.
Sure.
It's outside their comfort zone.
Right.
And so that surprised me, that there was often resistance. Well, do I have to do that? I don't want to do that. But yeah, I think that's a way people can grow, is to put themselves in someone else's shoes.
Right. Well, you were in that trajectory, though, right? Because of what you had forced yourself to do, and you were experiencing the benefit of having those different experiences, right? Wow. Well, it's always interesting to me when we look at our news cycles and we see people saying things and doing things and getting mad at each other, and I'm like, I've got a lot of history books, so I'm like, there's always been a bit of that, but at the end of the day, things still have to get done. So you went from the state level, and then you had a federal job.
Yeah, I spent 10 10 years. I've actually retired at the end of last year. And so I'm newly separated from that experience. But I work for the U.S. Department of Labor with the Veterans Employment and Training Service. It's a small agency within DOL that's mission is to help veterans find employment and to deal with employment issues. We're the agency that protects the rights of service members who volunteer for service or who are in the National Guard and maybe their employer doesn't quite understand their responsibilities. That's the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, or USERRA. We were the agency that investigated employers and when there was a claim against them. We provide a lot, or I'm going to have to learn to speak in the past tense, but we provided millions of dollars in grant funds to help homeless veterans get back on their feet, to put veteran representatives in the state employment offices. So that was the connection. I had worked with the folks at USDOL that were based in this state throughout my career. And so
you knew the problems.
That's right. Yeah.
You knew the challenges that were there, so you weren't stepping into a position that you weren't mindful of what you were stepping into.
That's right. Yeah, the people that I replaced when I came over to U.S. Department of Labor vets were my friends. They were people I'd worked with for many years, and so it was a great opportunity when a position opened up. It was in the same building, so it wasn't like I had to move or anything. I just moved across the hall, and so I served as the state director here in North Carolina for a number of years, and then my last 2 years or so, I was the deputy regional administrator for the 8 states, what we call the Atlanta region. So those directors then reported to me.
So we know that the Carolinas certainly we have a lot of veterans, we have bases, a lot of bases. We have a lot of things that happen in the Carolinas, in Wilkes County. A lot of people have served, still serving, right? But I think it might be surprising to people who are not veterans, not living that part, to hear how many challenges there actually are for veterans, people who have served our country. There are concerns there that for many are quite daunting, aren't they?
They are. It can be a difficult transition when you leave the military. We've been in a state of war for many years, so a lot of the veterans are dealing with that. Also, a lot of folks go in the military right out of high school. They don't have any civilian work experience,
right?
And so you spend a 20-year career and you come out and you've gotten promotions. Well, we don't do promotions necessarily out here in the civilian world. You have to apply, if you want to move up and make the case and develop a resume and things that are somewhat foreign to people serving on active duty. And then I mentioned the side with things with USERRA. A lot of folks are in the National Guard, the reserves. They're committed to being part of the defense of this country, and they deal with employers that don't understand why they have to be gone. And the employer doesn't always understand why they have to keep that job open for the person when they come back.
Why do you think that is? I would imagine, just from looking at it from my standpoint of where I stand, and I'm familiar with a lot of veterans organizations and a lot of people who serve, but there's still I think the number is only 3% of Americans really have anything in that game as it relates to people who are serving or their spouses, right? So that's a very small percentage.
It is, and it's growing smaller. There's a large veteran population in this country, but it's very top-heavy towards older people my age and even older. I think there are probably more veterans in the workforce that are older than 65 years old than there are that are younger than 35 years old, if you can imagine that. And so we're seeing that maybe 1% of kids today will end up serving in the military, 1%. But North Carolina, we have 800,000 veterans, you know, and so obviously as us older folks age out of the workforce, the veteran population is going to get smaller.
It's getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. And people do tend to be moved by what's, you know, around them and their family and their community. Yeah. So for those, so to be fair then, for those companies that you had to inform and educate on, these are the rights of our veterans. This is why you need to do that. That oftentimes the people making those assumptions or having those assumptions of why we need to do that, they don't have a frame of reference.
That's right. Yeah. I saw our role a lot as education for employers, and we made strong efforts to do outreach. I would partner with the employment ESGR, Employment Service Guard and Reserve, that is made up mostly of veterans who volunteer to work with the Guard and Reserve to make sure they're aware of their rights and benefits. But we would do educational things for employers together. I've worked with a lot of organizations to do seminars that were recorded and then they could be replayed, you know, at training sessions and that kind of thing.
So once that happened, once the owner, the decision maker in the company, once they were informed, they were educated on the whys, was that pretty much the thing that helped most of them say, oh, sure, I see it now?
Yeah, I think so. I would have very, very limited experience with employers acting out of any kind of malice or disregard or disrespect. It's mostly a matter of not being knowing. Educated. It's a complicated law. There's lots and lots of requirements that fall on employers. We've put together booklets and things to share information. And like I said, we've done outreach at places like the State Human Resources Association's annual conference. But, you know, there's new businesses opening all the time.
Sure.
And there's companies that don't have experience with having veterans work for them. And when they do get a veteran or a member of the Guard and Reserve, they just don't always know the responsibilities.
Right. And understanding, too.
That's right.
Because not everyone comes back without some baggage.
Exactly.
Yeah, and understanding that's complicated. So as you went through that journey and you realized, well, wait a minute, it's about time for me to stop doing this. That had to be a bit of an emotional journey for you.
It was. It's last year. I'd been thinking about retiring all year, and a lot of it is because of this opportunity I've had to write since 2022. It's where my passion is now. I've spent 40 years in public service, and I thought, well, it's time to do
something for me.
Something that I'm passionate about.
Right.
Not that I wasn't passionate about that, but I'd reached a point where there's plenty of other people that could do what I was doing now.
Sure.
And the writing, it's been calling me for a while.
Well, let's talk about that. So obviously you retired last year from your public job, and now you're in a very private job, right? But there's a whole stack of books here, and which we're going to get into. But those books, you couldn't have written those in a few months. So when did you start writing?
My daughter, Gloria, I'd have to give her credit for. I mean, I'd talked about writing for years. Lip service, without actually doing anything. And she found this website called Storyworth.com and bought a subscription for it. And what it does, it allows children to encourage their parents to write down their memories so that they're preserved. And the way it works is it sends you a question every week.
Right.
Whoever paid for the subscription chooses the questions, and they come in an email to you, and you write about it. And so I ended up with 50-some essays after a year of doing this, and I found that I really liked it. And at the end of the year, you get a bound book with all of your essays in it. So it's a great way to preserve those memories. But I put that together, and I was telling my good friend Jerry Langford about it, who is the editor of the Wilkes Record. And he said, wow, I bet we could publish some of that. And I said, oh, you got to be joking, you know. And so I sent him one. It was about the time I was almost kidnapped by the Harry Krishna cult. That was my first one.
That was your first story?
Yeah, that was probably the most exciting one. And I said,
stop a minute. Wait a minute. You can't just go beyond that. I mean, so how'd that happen?
Well, a good friend of mine, we were graduated from high school.
Right.
It was the day after graduation, and we were poor kids. We weren't going to the beach, you know. And so my friend shows up at my house Saturday morning early, wakes me up. He said, man, I have met these people. They've invited us to an orgy. And, you know, I'm 17 years old.
Right.
A couple of months away from being 18. I thought, an orgy, man. When have I ever had an opportunity like this, right? So we climbed in his Chevy Vega, smoke pouring out the back, and drove to Hungry Mother State Park in Wistful, Virginia. And when I got
to go out of state,
cross state lines with a minor. When we pulled up at the park, there was a white van there with two guys wearing the Harry Krishna robes in there, and the shaved heads and all that. I'd never even heard of the Harry Krishna, you know, other than...
I was getting ready to say, where were they at, Nelkin? They were not in Wilkes.
He met them in West Park Shopping Center on a Friday night down there, you know. It was back in the days when kids hung out
recruiters, that's
right. Well, they tried to recruit us. He and I climbed into the van. They generously shared some fruit with us, and they drugged us. And I came to hours later, and we were still at the campground, and there was a whole crowd of Harry Krishna there then, in a big motorhome, and they were talking about us. When I came back to you know, reality, they were talking about shaving our heads and sending us to Dallas to the temple.
So that's you hadn't had that all your life?
No, I had a full head of hair back then, very bright red hair, by the way. I told my friend, we managed to go to the bathroom. They weren't like holding us in custody or anything. And I told him, I said, we got to get out of here. I said, these people are going to kidnap us. And he agreed, and we came back and made a run for it and jumped into Vega. And there was a heart-stopping moment when, will it start or not? But it started, and we took off, and they chased after us.
Did they?
Yeah, we ended up in Boone and spent the night with some friends we knew there. And the next day, when we got back down on Pads Road, his dad told us they had been there looking for him in their van. And you know, what a scary experience.
Wow. So they were coming to the house to pick you up.
Came to his house.
Trying to anyway.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, back that cult, I think, was better known back in the 70s and early 80s, and was more visible, like at airports and stuff. And they've underwent some legal scrutiny and been convicted of some of the things that it's obvious they were doing, which was recruiting people with a very heavy hand to be part of that religion.
Well, maybe that started your maybe that fruit had some pretty strong... That's why you couldn't get through school. You're like, I just can't think.
Yeah, that would have been an education, that's for sure.
Oh, my goodness. Wow, Harry Krishna, my goodness. Well, I'm glad they weren't in Wilkes. I was just, where were they at? So, wow, so that was the first story you wrote?
That was the first thing I wrote.
What did people say? You had to have had comments about that.
Oh, tremendous, especially from people that I'd grown up with here in
Did they know the story already or not?
Some people did. I've told it a lot, you know, like at dinner and stuff, just for the shock value. See, it still works, right?
Absolutely.
But, and it was the first question my daughter sent me, too. And so that was the first one I had written because it's such a vivid story, and there was just that element of real danger there.
Right.
You know?
So what came next? You wrote, you had 50 stories in that book, right?
Yeah. I've probably written 100 and maybe 120 columns now for the Wilkes Record since that was September of 2022. But I think the next thing I wrote was Jerry asked me to write about the Smithy's store.
Okay,
it had burned.
Sure.
And he and I had such good memories there. We both loved the burgers.
The Goodwill burgers.
The Goodwill burgers,
right.
you know. And so I wrote about, you know, growing up, going there and eating there with family, and how important that place was. And one of my relatives, Lane Dyer, worked there, and he was such a dapper, you know, well put together man. So such a role model, you know, to go in there and see him.
Now, did you know that the Smithy's, the department store there was? There were other Smithy stores as well?
I didn't until years later when I worked for the Employment Security Commission. We had an office in West Jefferson, and I was occasionally detailed to work in that office, too. It was a satellite of Boone where I worked full-time initially, and I discovered that they had the same setup. You know, they had a department store there, and they had the little lunch counter in there, and I was able to try it. It closed before this one did, I think. But I know there was a number of them at one time, but those are the only two I ever personally got to visit.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure that column gleamed a lot of curiosity as well, because there are a lot of memories there, right, for a lot of people.
Yeah. My grandfather, you know, he was around at the beginning, and it was a guy selling these burgers out of a tent, you know, downtown. And, you know, he remembered that.
So was he getting the burgers from Smithy's, or was he the originator of the burgers and then Smithy's incorporated them?
Yeah, he was the original. I guess he was a Smithy, and ended up, you know, the burgers led to a store, and you know,
that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's a story. So, all right. So lots of experiences with writing and becoming a published columnist in a newspaper. So, when did that finally begin to dawn in that this is a cool thing? People are noticing what I'm writing, and then you're seeing all this feedback. What was that like for you?
It's very gratifying, right? I mean, I like it. It's addictive to write and for people to appreciate it. You know, I'm not trying to make a living or anything doing this, but a chance for people to read and appreciate something that I came up with. Wow, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, and then when it's published, then it's out there for everyone. And now, of course, you've made a book out of those. Let's talk about how that happened. What was that moment of decision of okay, I've written all these columns for the paper, and people like them, I like them, and when was that decision made? Let's put that in a book.
Well, actually, I ended up writing a novel along with the columns.
So you were doing the novels first?
I probably in parallel, I would say. After I'd written 4 or 5 columns, and, you know, this is on the front end of that, I don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, I thought Jerry and Ken are going to get tired of this, you know? I mean, they're probably going to say, well, yeah, thanks, but we've got all we need right now. And so I didn't know how long it was last. And I ran across an email that my brother had sent me 10 years earlier that someone else had sent him about a distant relative of ours who was a murderer in the 1880s. And, you know, he just sent it as, you might be interested in this. And I was looking for my grandfather's military records to do something to commemorate his time in the military. And I ran across this email, and I got to reading it, and I thought, wow, this would make a great book. And there's all kinds of information, you know, available now online. Newspapers that have been archived, you know, electronically, and memoirs that people had written. And it was the Notorious Outlaw Lodge Church. Let's see, which one is it here? Yeah. So this is the book.
So that was your very first one.
That's my first.
Let me see that. So this is your first one. Yeah. So that's it. That's number one. Yeah. And this, once again, is about your notorious relative.
That's right. He was a highwayman, a thug, a robber, and he held people up. He preferred to sneak into people's houses and rob them. And the book is about his descent, which is eventually he goes into a house when somebody's there, they recognize him, and he kills the person. And, and so
that's how he became a murderer.
That's right. Yeah,
right.
And then he went through a period where he was in hiding. He was eventually captured and lynched before he could stand trial. And so very exciting. 1880s, he was from Wilkes. The murder happened over in Alexander County. Some of the spoils from the robberies was spent in Ashe and Allegheny County. So it's really a regional
story. A regional story.
And he escaped from the Wilkes jail.
Oh, he did?
The same jail that's there now, when it was much newer. I think it was built in 1859. This is about 1881. And
so he's like an Otto Wood kind of a guy?
He's like the original Otto Wood kind of guy. And it was gratifying to find out that the folks at the Wilkes Heritage Museum, who've been very kind to me, and they carry all my books in their gift shop, did not know that there had been an escape. But it was well documented in the landmark newspaper out of Statesville, all about how he and some others had escaped from the
So how did they catch him?
He was spotted by some revenue officers. Okay. And he fled from them, and one shot him in the leg, and he was brought down then.
Right. Okay.
He was in jail. He escaped several times. Spent time on the chain gang in different places. He was a really hardened criminal, and of course, he had hoped to escape from the Alexander County jail before he could be tried for that murder, and outraged citizenry finally caught up with him, and
that's how it happened. Yeah. Wow. Well, kind of a Houdiniac went bad, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's so he was your relative. How? I mean, how far? So this was gone back several years. So he would have been, like your 12th cousin, or your did you?
First cousin 4 times removed is what ancestry.
First cousin 4 times removed.
Yeah, his sister was my ancestor. So, so at least I'm not descended from him directly.
Right.
The rest of his family were good.
That's why you wanted to be in the Air Force. You wanted to get out there and shoot people. But that's not it. Well, anyway, there's plenty of things in everybody's history. Okay, so that was book number 1.
Yes.
So how long after you released the book that you started to get enough feedback that people were giving you enough compliments that fueled your next book?
It wasn't long. I started a new novel almost immediatly, and the Wilkes Heritage Museum asked me to come talk about the book.
About this book?
About that book.
Okay.
And we had a good turnout, and people were really interested. And as you said, I had collected my columns into books by then, too. And so they were able to sell some of these, and I was there to sign them when people were interested. And
so you released those in stages?
The first, like I said, I didn't know how long it was going to last at first. So the first 2, I just got maybe 25 or 30 columns, and I thought, well, this is enough.
Okay.
That one says 27. Yeah.
So you've got volume 1. So this was the first one. So what story starts this one off?
That's the Harry Krishna.
The Harry Krishna. Okay, all right. So that's in this book. So everybody, I'm sure that's been a popular one. And then volume 2. So what's the first one? What starts this one off?
I would have to look and see.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can help you with that. Water.
Oh, it's talking about the peril that we're in parts of the country because of water. Everything's, I don't write everything history, but I was thinking about that recently because of the situation in Los Angeles. My daughter lives there,
right?
And they weren't home when all these fires were there. But we're in a terrible situation, especially in parts of the country, for fresh water.
Oh, and sure.
So that's just talking about that.
Sure. That was such a complicated fire because of the way it happened, and then water supplies. So if you aren't familiar with the water drought and how complicated that's been for years, really.
Right.
It's easy to judge harshly on, well, why wasn't there just abundant water anywhere? They just don't have it, do they?
Yeah, we don't think much about that here. But,
no, because that's right.
Yeah, but I was stationed in Denver. I was stationed in California.
Mm-hmm.
I was in what they call the high desert.
Oh,
and
sure.
That helped me to see that the water we take for granted, there's a creek everywhere you turn around here, But boy, it's not like that in parts of the world.
No, it's not. But we don't have a lot of sand either. Well, actually, we do have sand on the coast. We have plenty of sand.
Yeah, the sand hills. Once you get out to Raleigh and down that way, things get a lot sandier.
And we have plenty of water too. So, okay. So this is what really got it started, right?
That's right.
Sharing the columns, and then you've got another book that's came out. Let's talk about what. Well, so let's just go down the list real quick. So these are your 2 volumes here. Was there another volume?
Yep, this is the newest one.
Okay, so this is.
I'm a little more confident now. So this is a whole year's worth of
columns. I was getting ready to say, look at that.
Yeah.
So you've got 49 stories in this one. So this is volume 3, and all 3 of these volumes they're at the Wilkes Heritage Museum.
Wilkes Heritage Museum. Yeah. They're at the Wilkes County Public Library.
At the library.
And the Wilkes Community College Bookstores just agreed to carry some.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's see. Hold on a minute. Let's open up. There's a foreword. Oh, A Hero's Grave. That's the first one.
About another ancestor of mine who is not a killer. At least he was not a criminal, I would say, because
he was in war.
Captain Robert Cleveland was a hero of the American Revolution.
So he's one of your relatives?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm descended directly from him. Mm-hmm. So it's not which I welcome. And he and his brother, Colonel Benjamin Cleveland. Much better known. But Robert Cleveland was there the whole time and saved his brother on at least.
Well, it's his cabin that's behind the Wilkes Courthouse now, right?
That's right.
Mary Boland does those cooking demonstrations there, right?
And his grave, which that was the photo of the grave, is up there near where his cabin used to stand before it was moved up in Purlear on Parsonsville Road.
Right.
And there's a little family cemetery there. My brothers and I rode up last year together, and there's no parking lot or anything.
Right.
We just pulled off the road, but we were able to walk up there and see the grave and how well tended it is. And I just was reflecting on how important somebody like that was to us.
Sure. Did you know all of that? You knew he was a descendant. You were a descendant, but did you know all of his history before you started writing?
Maybe I had heard of these guys,
right?
Robert and Benjamin Cleveland, maybe. But if that was taught in school, I don't have any recollection of it, know, which is an issue with me, is that our history is so endangered, because people just don't know. And I think the way that you preserve that history is by bringing it to life,
right?
Not by some dry textbook where read chapter 3 and answer the questions. And so I feel like I'm kind of on a mission to try to preserve that history and bring it back to life.
Let's talk about that for a moment. I concur with the idea that history is profoundly important, and what's really significant now, is our Carolina history, American history. It's just not been that long ago. So, your relative, here's his headstone, right? But in the scope of time, of societies, it's just not been that long ago.
A couple of 100 years since he passed. I guess.
And I mean, and then Benjamin Cleveland was, oh my gosh, he was incredibly well known as well, and with a militia leader, and he was the one. He was the one that with the Over the Mountain Men, and they met in Kings Mountain. There was a battle there, and he came back riding the white horse of the leader on the other side.
Trophy.
So that's right. So that is, it does two things. Number one, it hadn't been that long ago, and then the commitment and the sacrifice and the things that had to be done to make a country. Is a lot. Have you been mindful of that as you're discovering this, and now that you have time to contemplate these things? That's a big deal.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's what this book is about. The Tory Oak. It's Colonel Benjamin Cleveland's story, and his brother Robert's story. Building a nation is not easy.
It's not.
It's not like you could write Great Britain a letter and say, "Hey, we'd like our freedom."
Right.
People don't give up real estate.
The return to sender, right?
Yeah.
It was like, no, you're not free yet. So
they don't hand over power. So these guys were revolutionaries in the truest sense of the word. If they'd failed, they would have all been hanged, you know, for treason.
So what was the story, or one of the stories in this book, as you're looking at Benjamin and Robert Cleveland's life and their journey, and what one story just really stood out to you and said, wow, that's big?
I think the most exciting part is when Colonel Benjamin Cleveland had a farm over in what's now Ashe County, kind of in Fleetwood there near Deep Gap, and he was over there. He went without his troops, and by then he was well known by the Loyalists, the Tories, and he was spotted by a troop, and they kidnapped him, and were planning to turn him over to the British for a reward, and of course where he would have been executed.
Right.
And word got out that he'd been captured. His brother Robert, who lived, there in Purlear, got a party together, and they went after the gang that had kidnapped Benjamin and tracked him down and rescued him and freed him. And then the ones that survived the recapture ended up hanging on the Tory Oak. And so I think that's happening kind of towards the end of the American Revolution, when things are almost over. But it was a near thing. If it hasn't been for Robert, Benjamin Cleveland wouldn't have survived.
Right. Good thing family's there, right?
That's right. It's good to have a brother you can depend on.
Good thing. When we talk about that piece of history and what you've just described, that event that took place, you can put that story within a family line that you're part of, right? But that was not an uncommon trait, was it? People were often they had to do things to save their property, to save their family. Right. It was a time when that was required of just about everybody, right?
That's right. We didn't have any of the kind of infrastructure that we have now,
right,
240 years ago.
Yeah, you couldn't call the National Guard. Right. You couldn't call the SBA.
So Benjamin Cleveland's off in Tennessee fighting the Indians, Cherokee and the Shawnee, with other militia from North Carolina. And his wife is home with her two sons, who are teenagers, and they find a horse thief trying to steal their horse. You can't pick up the phone and call 911.
Right.
And she told her two teenage sons, well, what would your father do if he was here? And the boy said, well, he would hang him. And she said, okay, hang him.
I knew where you're going. I heard that story before. Yeah. I was like, wow, that was justice served, I guess.
Can you imagine today, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids and taking on that and taking that responsibility to preserve the safety of their home and preserve their possessions. It's a different world.
Well, I think that's exactly it. It is different. That experience simply doesn't happen. There are other things that happen, but the way of taking care of those things, you do call 911. You do get somebody to come and legally take care of that. But my goodness, it speaks to a thing that we're just not that far removed from. Once again, that's amazing. Okay, what's next?
Another book that I have put together is about the Fort Hamby gang.
Oh, sure.
And
sure.
That one, actually, I wrote that before the Tory Oak. A couple points about that. You know, if you drive up 421 towards Boone, you see the Fort Hamby campground.
That's right. That's right.
I didn't know what that was. I thought, did there really used to be a fort here, you know, with troops and, you know, everything? Well, no, there wasn't. Fort Hamby was a fortified log cabin up on a hill. The site's still there, right overlooking what's now the reservoir, but back then, of course, was just the Yadkin River. But it was a band of outlaws who were deserters from the Civil War. So the action in this book is happening in 1865, right at the end of the Civil War. And the deserters who were, you know, either from the Union side and they were far from home, or from the Confederate side and they were outcasts, they didn't have any way to survive. And so they turned to robbery, you know? Oh. And so the Fort Hamby gang was a gang of outlaws that terrorized the community around here, stealing mostly from the well-to-do, from the slave owners, frankly, at the time. But they would go in and hold everybody up and take their possessions and tell the slaves to run for it, and then they would go back to their hideout. And they had... this went on for quite some time, and people in the area finally were fed up. And since the war was over, a lot of veterans were coming home. And where, you know, the people that were here before didn't have a lot of weapons and didn't have a lot of
they didn't have the wherewithal to do it.
Right. When these veterans came home, they
had learned a few things. Right?
So they went up there and ended the outlaw threat in the most violent way possible. Fort Hamby burned, and you can still see some of the bricks on the ground up there if you can make your way back into the site. It's pretty hard to get back there, but and they executed the ones that they captured by firing squad right there on the spot, and buried them there.
Wow.
So, exciting story.
Were any of these your relatives?
No, not that I know of. I put some people in there who were representing relatives of mine.
Okay, all right. I was going to say this is a family collection.
I would like to tell you briefly about a connection that's in both of this book and the Outlaw Lives Church book.
Okay, all right.
There's a man named Romulus Zachariah Linney. These two.
Oh, these two. Oh, the Fort Hamby book. Okay.
Yeah, and this one.
Okay, all right.
Romulus Zachariah Linney was a Civil War veteran who was at the siege of Fort Hamby to end that outlaw threat.
He was there to help take care of the problem.
He was there. He was one of the veterans who was there on the hillside, you know.
We'll go fix this.
Ready to attack. And then later on, he became a lawyer and a U.S. congressman. And he lived in Wilkes County at one time, but what had become Alexander County, I think, in the 1840s.
Okay.
But Romulus Zachariah Linney is the great-grandfather of the actress Laura Linney. In fact, her father's name is Romulus Zachariah Linney III. And I discovered that as I was writing it because he's in this book in a kind of a heroic role of fighting the outlaws. And he stops the first attempt at lynching Lige Church in Alexander County. He's a congressman by then, and he sees that a lynching is about to occur, and he comes out and speaks against it and shames the men into going home.
Was it because of the the person, or because of just he felt the morality of lynching?
The morality and the injustice and the need to follow laws and that kind of thing. But so he's kind of a real positive character, and ended up in both those books, which surprised me, when I realized, well, this is the same guy, Do
you find yourself, as you're going down this journey of discovering people in history, in this case, he's not a descendant, right? But he's an interesting person, an interesting character. As you're writing about these, do you ever think, gee, I'd like to have coffee or dinner with that person? I'd love to talk to them.
The people that I would most like to meet are the sheriffs in both of these books, the roles they played, and their single-minded efforts to uphold the law and to deal with all these things that were going on when they didn't have all this deep well of support like we would have now.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, it was what a position of authority.
Well, I guess you can imagine. Yeah. I guess you can. You can imagine. All right.
After both books had come out, I got to thinking, I bet Miss Lenny would like to know about her famous ancestor here. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out and contacted her PR people and got an address, and I sent her these books along with the history that her father or great-grandfather had written about his experiences at Fort Hanby, because he was one of the ones that wrote a little memoir about it. And then I sent her a nice letter just explaining that I hope she would enjoy learning about her ancestor. Unfortunately, I've not ever heard back.
You haven't heard back from her. Well, she didn't return to sender, though, right?
No. But I was hoping that she would find it as fascinating as I did.
Give her time.
Yeah.
Give her time.
Maybe we'll come.
Yeah. There you go. What's next?
Yeah. Well. I wanted to talk about this book in particular, Historical Sketches of Wilkes County, which I did not write.
You didn't write it?
I did not write this. John Crouch, who was a newspaper man here in Wilkes, worked for the Chronicle newspaper, and he put this together in 1902. And it was printed here in town on the printing press of the newspaper. I don't know how many copies were made, but he copyrighted it. And so the Library of Congress had a copy of it. And as I was researching these other books, I kept running across Crouch. Crouch said this and Crouch said that. And well, according to Crouch. And I thought, well, who in the heck is Crouch?
Right.
And so I started digging into that, and I found out, quite a bit about him. And I found that this book is available from the Library of Congress electronically. It's been digitized.
Right.
But, it's an atrocious copy. I guess it probably went from being put together on a printing press to being changed to microfilm, and then to being electronically digitized.
Yeah, right. It'd be miserable to read.
Yeah. It was a mess, and I thought, well, this is it's going to be lost. People aren't going to know who Crouch is in another generation. So I thought, well, I'm going to try to preserve this and to put it in a form that people can read. And so I spent a whole summer going through that, and I didn't change anything other than like words that were obviously misspelled or where you could no longer tell exactly what it said. It's the unexpurgated version that he put together.
Did you do any side note commentaries?
I did.
Okay.
I added footnotes where, because I have a lot more information than John Crouch did, right? I mean, I have the internet.
Right.
And so there were a few things that maybe he got a little bit wrong, or that doesn't match what the historical record shows.
But you put his words, and then you put a note, a footnote with it, saying, hey, this is what really happened.
Yeah. So it's I guess it's the annotated version, because
these type of books are very valuable, because there are a lot of older books that may not have had big distribution, and there just aren't any of them around anymore. They are in the archives, but it's important history for an area. So have you gotten much feedback on this one?
I have. It's that book led to me getting the Lighthouse Award from the North Carolina Society of Historians for preserving.
I remember that, and I see the the sticker there.
That's got the little sticker on it. That's right.
Congratulations again.
So Crouch, interesting man, and ended up leaving Wilkes County and spending his life in New York City, where he worked for the Associated Press, and passed away and is buried on Staten Island. I'm hoping to go visit that grave someday.
Oh,
when I'm up that way. But he started out as a printer, building his own printing presses, carving out of wooden blocks, and he printed the first poem that was ever printed by James Larkin Pearson.
Is that right?
One of his little homemade newspapers. And they were good friends, and learned a lot about him from that Poet's Progress biography by James Larkin
So
Pearson.
A little bit of the spirit of Benjamin Franklin, right?
Yeah,
just
exactly.
A little bit.
They were all printers back then. Yeah, interesting book. It's not necessarily an original work by Crouch, I found, the more I looked into this. It's more a collection of things that are about Wilkes County. So some of it comes from Heroes of Kings Mountain, an earlier book by a man named Lyman Draper that's very, very
the Draper. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so the section on Benjamin Cleveland, straight out of that. Some of it comes...
it was straight out of that, but had Crouch put that... It was in his book, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
he just lifted it.
He was creatively inspired. Did he give credit to the other people or not?
Mostly not.
Mostly not.
Mostly not. But it's different age, and Historical Sketches of North Carolina is a book by John Hill Wheeler, who was a well-known politician back in the 1800s, and it's another comprehensive book. So some of it came from there too.
Okay, good. And you've made notes, of course, on what those things are. All right. So it was more. You weren't just pulling down information. You put a considerable amount of work into this product as well.
Oh yes, it's and a true labor of love too, because, like I said, there's stuff in there that no one would know nowadays.
All right. Nice. What's next? We're just about to the bottom.
Yeah. Well, I decided to write a fantasy novel. This has nothing to do with Wilkes County. It's actually set in Winston-Salem, where I live now.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a spiritual journey and a little bit of my take on maybe what the greater universe is like.
Right.
But,
the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Yeah, that's actually was a book of magic that in Roman times.
Right.
So that was the inspiration. I ran across that doing some of my online research.
So is this one of your whimsical expressions?
It is. It's a departure from anything else that I've done.
So these are your dreams?
Yeah. My wife liked it a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's enough reason to write it, right?
Yeah, a few of my friends that have read it have appreciated it too. But it's pure fantasy.
Well, if you look at the back of the words, I mean, it certainly seems to be the type of thing that you would watch a movie about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that what it is? Did you watch a movie and make notes?
No, but I would like to see it made into a movie.
That's right. All right. So that's on the. What's next?
The last one it's not anything original, but I've written a lot about the American Revolution here in Western North Carolina.
Right.
And a lot about the Battle of Kings Mountain. And so that's a collection of specifically the columns that I've written about that.
Okay.
From Rendezvous Mountain to the Battle of Kings Mountain to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse and the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge.
Right. So that's a collection of those stories.
Yes.
So there's stories that you have written, and you just pull them together for this.
Just in one place.
I like these compilations, though, because it makes it easier to share with people. Not everybody may get the record or wherever which is where your columns go, and this gives us something to do this with, to flip through.
It's all thematically connected.
Right. So you've just been doing this for a few years. Right, you've been writing for really just a few years. Right?
Yeah. It's like I said, 2022 was the year I started. 2, 3, 4,
5. A few years. If we look forward, we look 5 years down the road. Okay, so here's the stack now, right? So 5 years down, you did this in 3 years. So 5 years from now, are you just going to, do you imagine, have you got enough ideas? Do you have enough creative thoughts that the stack's going to just get a lot higher?
It's certainly my intention. It's like I said, it's a passion. I would rather do this than almost anything. And
so it's feeding you.
It is. I've always been a person that liked to read books, but now I enjoy writing more than I do reading, and it just feels a need in me.
So if your parents were here now, what would they say about you, seeing your accomplishments in life, seeing these books? What would they be saying?
Well, my brother said, we're all flabbergasted that you're able to do this. So I think it would be something along those lines.
Flabbergasted, that's right. Yeah. Well, I would imagine if you were still, that 18-year-old, well, after you got over that candy or that fruit, that you would never imagine. Was there any creative bent in your life at all when you were a kid?
I tried to write a few things when I was a teenager because I was an avid reader, especially of science fiction, and so,
even as a kid.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a writer, but I think something was missing, something that I needed. Now I like to say I spent decades as a writer, but I was writing policies and memoranda and directives and presentations and that kind of thing, and that experience in public service where I've just written volumes and volumes of stuff that was transitory, work related, but it gave me the ability to communicate more clearly, and I think that's what I was probably missing. Was I needed the deep well of experience of using words to make sure people understood, and that I was being clear about what I wanted them to do.
That's the secret to it, isn't it? It's one thing to write words, but to write words that people comprehend and understand the meaning. That's a skill. Yeah.
Yeah. An old boss of mine said communications is blank, blank hard work, and he was right. I can't tell you how many times I failed to communicate clearly when I thought I knew what I was saying, and somebody else reads it and they're like, well, I thought he meant
saying?
this.
Right.
It's a challenge.
So be clear in your writing, right?
Yeah.
Lane, this has been fantastic sailing with you, visiting with you, hearing your story. You're fascinating. I'm going to have a read on some of these books. As I said, I think I shared with you when we sat down earlier that I have Siri read to me your columns. So when they come up in the paper, I'll just highlight the, you can do that and then just say speak, and then there she goes.
I didn't know you could do that. That's fascinating.
You didn't know?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's good. You get that cataract surgery, you'll appreciate that.
Yeah, I bet.
You'll appreciate. Well, Wayne, I know you've got a lot coming up in the future. I understand you're going to be doing a few things to lend some of your skills to help the good folks at the North Carolina Society of Historians, maybe with a newsletter, right?
Yes, they have asked me to take on some roles there, bringing back their newsletter from the Quill as editor, serving on the board of directors, and acting as their communications director and doing media outreach and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about that because I said I'm passionate about history, and I'm really passionate about what that organization is doing to preserve it.
And I clearly believe that you do not have the capacity to retire and go silently out.
That's right. Yeah.
Lots of things in the future. Lane, we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.